Hey everybody, Andrew here, and welcome back to my channel. Now, if you don't know what I do by now, basically, if it's Canadian, I want to talk about it. The Comedy Network. Now, usually this is the part where I do a deep dive into its creation, but I don't really get to do that this time. Unfortunately, there's nobody named John Q. Comedy who wanted to spread laughter across Canada and did so with his own network. In truth, it was created in 1997 as part of the specialty channel craze of the 90s. The Comedy Network acted as a sister station to the US-based Comedy Central, so we got a lot of exclusives from them like South Park and The Daily Show, and they also aired reruns like WKRP in Cincinnati, SCTV, and of course The Kids in the Hall. For me, some of my memories of it are waking up on Sundays and watching The Three Stooges, and then as I got a little older, watching Insomniac with Dave Attell on Fridays, which I attribute largely to A, my love of Dave Attell's comedy, and B, where I got most of my sense of humor. But the Comedy Network did have a few of its own original shows, and today I would like to take a look at them. So let's take a look at some of the Comedy Network's biggest hits. But before we do that, let's start with the honorable mentions that, while they may not have been the biggest shows, they helped to shape the Comedy Network into what it was. Starting off with Liography, which was later changed to Liocracy after threats by A&E. Liography was a parody of the then popular A&E show Biography and was hosted by Leslie Nielsen, who played the character of Terrence McKenney. Each episode centered around a parody of a pop culture figure at the time, whether this was Eminem or Stephen King, as well as a few characters who were based on Canadian icons such as the Friendly Giant or Anne Shirley. The show ran for 2 seasons. Improv Heaven and Hell. If you ever saw my Speaker's Corner video, you'll know that the Devil's Advocates got their career started on Speaker's Corner and eventually got their own TV show on the Comedy Network. Improv Heaven and Hell was a show that had a revolving cast of comedic actors who would take suggestions from the audience and act out the situations, which of course is what improv is. Now, this show is interesting because to me, it's kind of an example of early viral fame paying off. Alice, I think. Based on the Susan Juby book of the same name, Alice, I think, tells the story of 15-year-old Alice, a girl who is starting to discover her identity after being homeschooled most of her life and now moving to high school. The show only lasted 1 season and was a departure from a lot of the Comedy Network's typical programming, as it leaned more towards the dramatics than their shows. Keys to the VIP. Keys to the VIP was a reality competition where 2 men went head-to-head trying to pick up women and see who was ultimately the better player. The show has since found its way onto YouTube, where a lot of commentators seem to like to poke fun at the silliness and over-the-top nature of the show, and as well as how dated it is. But the thing you need to remember about this show is that it was on the Comedy Network. Making fun of a show that is on the Comedy Network is like making a parody of a parody movie. Wait, they actually did that? And lastly, Picnic Face. Picnic Face was a comedy troupe that most people may know for their Power Thirst video, but they did end up getting a show on the Comedy Network. The show sees them going about their day-to-day lives, as well as being intercut with skits. Now, after this show was canceled, they went out and did a movie called Roller Town, and members Mark Little and Andrew Bush ended up with their own show on CBC called Cavendish. Anyways, let's get back to it and let's talk about the ones who brought in the green. In this case, Tom Green. The Tom Green Show, not the Green Tom Show, started right around the same time as the network. It featured Tom and his signature style of comedy, whether that was pranks, skits, or him just being out there and weird. It was classic Tom Green. But the thing that I need to talk about is when it comes to people like Tom Green, there seems to be this tendency to assume that all they ever did was dick around and eventually got a show out of it. But that's not true. See, the thing about the Tom Green Show is that this was a long-running career for Tom, even before he got on the network. It all started when he was 16 years old and signed up to do stand-up at Yuck Yucks. From there, he started a rap group called Organized Rhyme, who ended up winning a Much Music Video Award for their song Check the OR. From there, he would go to Algonquin College, where he would host a radio show. Eventually, the show proved popular enough that Rogers Community TV would give him a shot at his own show. Tom Green's show would air for a few years, before he would take a big swing for primetime and do a pilot for the CBC. Now, unfortunately, the CBC would pass on the Tom Green show, but the Comedy Network would pick him up. And honestly, I could not think of a better place for him. Tom was out there when it came to his comedy. He would do pranks, he would do silly things like walk around with bread on his head, or he would just go into stores and get on the intercom. With Tom, you never knew what to expect. And obviously the nation loved him, so of course they would get him out there and get him promoting the show. This would lead to him having an appearance on Mike Bullard, where Mike Bullard's agent would take an interest in Tom Green and he would end up getting a show on MTV dubbed The New Tom Green Show. So because of this, in actuality, his time on the Comedy Network was very short. A total of 26 episodes made it to air before Tom left for greener pastures. Now, there are two ways to look at this. One, Tom is a sellout and took the better deal as soon as he could, or two, Tom grew and made the best of what he had. And hey, as you're going to see through this video, he didn't forget where he came from. Although a lot of people will say that he was juvenile, I would say that this next show was much more juvenile. Juvenile offender, that is. It's Kevin Spencer.
Something's wrong with that kid.
Kevin Spencer aired in 1999 and was probably one of the strangest shows the network had. The show was created by Greg Lawrence, who was initially offered airtime for his animated shorts before being offered a full-blown show. The series revolved around the titular character, a 16-year-old sociopath, cough syrup hack, and chain smoker, along with his parents, the dim-witted Percy, and Anastasia. Of course, Kevin also had his imaginary friend, Alan, the talking goose, who sort of acted like his confidant and advisor in certain situations. Lawrence based Kevin on somebody he knew growing up in Belleville, Ontario. Looking at this show through the first season, I gotta say, it is something to behold. Lawrence was never a classically trained animator and was largely self-taught, so when you watch the first season, you'll notice that a lot of it seems very basic. In fact, watching the first season, if you had told me that this was a parody of a kids show, I would have believed you, because everything from the animation to how the story is told screams kids story. But this was all just experience, and as you continue to watch the show, you will probably notice that it gets much better over time. The animation gets better, they change how the story is told, relying more on the characters to guide it. And one thing I always appreciated was that each season they would change up the intro as well, highlighting new characters a little bit more. Now, the show is definitely an out there one. I mean, Kevin does pretty much every crime under the sun, whether that's Grand Theft Auto, illegal drugs, or cannibalism. If you name it, he's done it. And because of this, a lot of people like to compare it to South Park, which came out around roughly the same time. But for me, I feel like Kevin Spencer felt more like if someone gave Newgrounds their own television series. The show was a solid choice for the Comedy Network, as it would end up lasting 6 seasons, and thanks to Reddit has found a new fan base. I guess time really is a flat circle. It also has one of the few interesting honors, as it was one of the few shows to have a crossover on this network, as in one episode, Kevin would end up kidnapping Darren Jones and Mr. Mo from Buzz.
This show's so good, I got a boner. That's why you're watching Buzz this week.
When Tom Green left, they needed a new show to help fill in some of that airtime, and they found one in Buzz. Buzz took a similar route to Tom Green. Buzz had a community cable show on Rogers from 1996 all the way up to 1999, when they ended up getting the call up from the Comedy Network. Whereas Tom Green was like a late night freak show, Buzz was the kind of show that fit in well with late night adult phone lines and beer ads. In fact, Buzz even had their own phone line. Every episode would feature a different question, and they would ask viewers to call in with their answers. And then the next episode, they would play the answers they got. Now, in terms of the show's sense of humor, this show was more raunchy and just silly in general. It seems like they were more just there to goof around and have fun, whereas Tom Green was more of the gross out guy. Some of these would include streeters where they'd interview people, skits, or songs, which I have to give credit. Mr. Mo had this character called Country Mo, wherein which he would rap about aspects of being a black man in the country community, and he did a damn good job. This wasn't just tongue-in-cheek, he actually had production value on these videos, and he had lyrics. Like, if he had become a rapper, I would have not been surprised. The other thing about Buzz was that compared to the Tom Green Show, they knew how to be professional when it was time to be professional. So this led to them interviewing celebrities as well. This would include the likes of Christina Aguilera, Mr. T, and the one that I would kill to find footage of, Stone Cold friggin' Steve Austin. Now, before I finish talking about Buzz, I'd like to send out a little shout out to Dive in Canada, who did an amazing deep dive into the show and even got Mr. Mo to explain a little bit more information about it. So I recommend you check out that video if you're interested in hearing more about Buzz and getting a little bit more behind the scenes. Now, Buzz would run for 5 seasons before ending in 2005, and Darren would end up doing his best Tom Green impression by ending up at MTV Canada, that is. It's kind of amazing how many different mediums the Comedy Network uses. We've had animated, we've had reality, we've had just about everything except for a puppet show. Until we've had this next show,
Puppets Who Kill.
Puppets Who Kill was the brainchild of veteran puppeteer Johnny Pattinson, whose work includes Fraggle Rock and The Bride of Chucky. Adapted from his one-man ventriloquist show, which premiered in spring 1996, it would end up on airwaves in 2002. Puppets Who Kill was about the occupants of a halfway house in Toronto and their social worker who tries to keep the house running and make sure that they don't get into too much trouble, thus keeping him employed. There's Cuddles, a comfort doll who, though naive, can be prone to violent outbursts. Bill, the ventriloquist dummy who had previously killed his 58 past partners and collected testicles. Rocco, a former children's TV host with a violent temper. And Buttons, a hedonistic teddy bear who lost his job as a peanut butter spokesman after his lifestyle was publicly revealed. Now, personally, I always thought that Buttons was supposed to be a parody of the Kraft teddy bears. And lastly, rounding out the cast was Dan, their social worker who more or less just wanted to stay employed and do as minimal damage as possible. He's played by Dan Redican, who I previously mentioned in my Train 48 video, but was also the voice of Maurice the Maggot on Freaky Stories. Episodes revolved around the housemates getting into various types of trouble, such as get-rich-quick schemes, engaging in their various bad habits, whether that was selling clean urine or murdering everyone on TV in order to get the CBC better ratings. Fun and mayhem was bound to happen on this show. Production was a task, and I'm not sugarcoating it. They had a hard time because puppet shows require a lot of extra work. Sets have to be made with false floors and furnitures in order to allow the puppeteers to hide in the scenes while being able to act with the actors. They used a wide variety of different angles and tricks to hide them, which I appreciate because they made this more than just another puppet show. And they also took this as a chance to experiment with some different genres. So for example, one episode has Dan cutting them off from television and them ending up buying a cursed television and going into a full-blown Twilight Zone parody, or One Hot Summer in Toronto ending up being a full-on neo-noir parody. Now, Puppets Who Kill is probably my favorite Comedy Network show. It was ambitious, took a lot of work to make, tried a lot of different things, and the characters are well written and they took the puppetry seriously. It was probably one of their better originals, and I really wish it had gotten a bigger audience. The show ended in 2006 and John would go back to touring. The series would also win 3 Gemini Awards, and from what I've heard, they're supposedly starting work on a movie, but that was in the 2010s, so we'll see what happens. Well, we're down to the last show, and it is definitely an odd one because it's called Odd Job Jack. Finishing off this video is Odd Job Jack. Originally developed by Smiley Guy Studios, they called it a sit.com as it was meant to be an early web series in 2000. But when the .com bubble burst, they got some help with some financial backing from Molson, and they were able to develop the show into a full-blown television series. But this also meant that every time the show came on, they would have an ad for Molson Canadian. Odd Job Jack is about Jack Ryder, a sociology graduate who works at a temp agency and tries to find a full-time job. Each episode revolves around him getting a new job from Betty, his handler, his views on it, and him trying to learn the ropes and make it work. He usually starts to get the hang of it before losing the job, and he's back to square one by the end of the episode. Well, I mean, hey, it's not called Steadily Employed Jack for a reason. During his time at work, he usually would end up getting help from his friends Bobby, who was sometimes naive but would always try and help him out, and Leopold, a terminally online hacker who would try and find ways to take shortcuts and cheat. Now, Jack was played by Don McKellar, who is a Canadian legend, and in 2016 was appointed to the Order of Canada. But the show did also have a bevy of major guest stars as well. This would include John Goodman, Will Arnett, Catherine O'Hara, and performing a hat trick, Tom Green, who, despite leaving for greener pastures, appeared on multiple Comedy Network shows. Now, one of the unique aspects about this show was that they did not forget their .com background, and when each episode came out, a new game would appear on the Comedy Network website based on that episode. So when each game came out, whoever had the high score by the end of the week would end up getting a prize. Unfortunately, I can't show you what it looks like, but I think it was probably just items co-branded with Molson and Odd Job Jack. Honestly, Odd Job Jack was probably the last great show the Comedy Network had, and would finish in 2007. And this was a time when I remember a lot more TV shows were ending up online, which is ironic because they originally wanted this show to be watched online, and now they had come full circle. In 2019, the Comedy Network would become the Comedy Channel, signaling the end of an era. And although I know that their catchphrase was "time well wasted," I would have to say this: they tried a lot of different things, and not everything worked, but they did a lot of great things with television. So to me, watching the Comedy Network was far from time well wasted. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me. I hope you like this video. If you watch the Comedy Network, maybe share some comments about your memories of it. If not, tell me if you're gonna watch any of these shows that I mentioned. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me. I'm Andrew, and I'll see you later.